Shabbat Shalom, everyone, on this eve of the perhaps most important election in our nation's history. I send you Shabbat greetings. I hope that those of you who are with us in the United States have or already have a plan to do your civic duty. We'll be talking more about issues related to this time a little bit later. In the meantime, let's be grateful that we can be together in this way and start our service, our program tonight with Hine Matov.
Hine Matov u'mana'im, shevet achim gam yachad. Hine Matov u'mana'im, shevet achim gam yachad. Hine Matov u'mana'im, yelelai, lelelelelelelai. Hine Matov u'mana'im, yelelai, lelelelelelelai. Hine Matov u'mana'im, hine Matov u'mana'im, hine Matov u'mana'im, yelelai, lelelelelelai. Hine Matov u'mana'im, shevet achim gam yachad. Hine Matov u'mana'im, shevet achim gam yachad.
Ultimately, Shabbat is a call to action. Though on the seventh day we experience the world as it should be, the other 6 days each week we inhabit the world as it is. The real world is broken. Therefore, while Shabbat is a day of rejoicing, it also has the power to agitate. Shabbat pushes us to see the injustice in the world, to worry for those who cry out in hunger around us, to mourn the loss of our natural resources, and to rage against the forces of oppression and injustice that plague humanity. Our rituals, observances, our celebrations of the seventh day all seek to inspire our hope for redemption and to depict a vision of Tikkun Olam, a world repaired. Just as Shabbat calls us to provide rest for the earth, it reminds us that rest for human beings is also an imperative of social justice. Shabbat reminds us that we are not instruments of Pharaoh or any other oppressor. Let's continue as Arthur's famous hands light our Shabbat candles. Baruch ha'or ba'olam, Baruch ha'or ba'adam, Baruch ha'or ba'shalom, ba'shalom, Baruch ha'or, Baruch ha'or ba'shabbat. Wishing you and yours a l'chaim, long life and happiness. May we see the world each day with fresh eyes. May we always know day from night, true from false, wisdom from convenience. May our every step be on firm earth. May we see through illusion to reality. May we bring splendor and joy to all we touch. May we always know what it is to live in freedom. May we be a support to those who have fallen. May we guide those who wander to return to their true path. May our needs be fulfilled. May we draw strength from community. May we contribute to the splendor that is humankind. May we remember the joy of freedom, even in times of bondage. On life's path, may we never know weariness of body, mind, or spirit. We continue with Eifo Ori.
Kochi,
On the 4th of November, 1995, I was the director of the Hillel Student Center at the University of Illinois in Champaign. As Shomer Shabbos, Shabbat observant Jews, I was more traditional in those days, my young family and I spent our Shabbats in a small apartment at the Hillel. I got the New York Times every morning, but other than that, I was completely cut off from the events of the world throughout Shabbat. So you can imagine my surprise when shortly after a study session and a Havdalah ceremony to close out Shabbat, I headed to lock the front door of the Hillel before going home to find two reporters and their TV cameras standing there, lights on, microphones thrust forward, waiting for my reaction. I had no idea what they wanted me to react to. I soon found out they were talking about the assassination of the Prime Minister of Israel, Yitzhak Rabin, several hours earlier at a large peace rally in Tel Aviv. Thousands had just gathered at the large plaza in front of the city hall there, today known as Rabin Square. The purpose of the gathering was to rise up against a massive and massively hateful campaign of incitement against Prime Minister Rabin and the Oslo Accords, with their promise of ending much of Israel's occupation of the West Bank and Gaza. In the period of slightly more than 2 years since the accords were signed on the lawn of the White House, bringing the world and especially Palestinians and Israelis a sense of real hope for the termination of decades of bloodshed, right-wing politicians from the Likud party and other nationalist and nationalist religious groups had been engaging in constant goading and instigation of their angry followers. Future Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, then as now the leader of the Likud party, had accused Rabin and his government of betraying the Jewish people, Jewish tradition, and Jewish values. Orthodox nationalists regularly denounced him and the entire peace camp in all of their media and at Shabbat services and other gatherings. Some rabbis invoked an ancient law called the Din Rodef. This law permits a Jew to kill another Jew if they deem that Jew to be a murderer or potential murderer. In the scenario in which they discussed the Rodef Din, the potential murderer who needed to be stopped was Rabin himself. The level of incitement generated by invoking the Din Rodef, a law that really permitted extrajudicial execution back in the Babylonian Talmud's age, cannot be underestimated. In the end, it was the religious imprimatur that Rabin's assassin relied upon. In the weeks leading up to the assassination, the rhetoric emanating from the Israeli right sharpened in protests throughout the country. One of the most infamous gatherings occurred in Jerusalem, where thousands of right-wing protesters gathered with signs reading, "Traitor, Rabin is a murderer," and "Death to Rabin." Placards with depictions of Rabin wearing a keffiyeh, an Arab headdress, or in an SS uniform were everywhere. Protesters chanted, "In blood and in fire, we will expel Rabin." Other pictures of him were burned. Netanyahu was the featured speaker. Not long thereafter, another demonstration took place in the greater Tel Aviv suburb of Ra'anana. There, Netanyahu himself marched in front of a display of a casket and a noose. On the night of November 4th, 1995, the peace rally in Tel Aviv concluded with the popular Israeli song Shir LaShalom, a song of peace. So just sing a song of peace, it says. Don't whisper a prayer. Just sing a song of peace. Shout it aloud. Lift your eyes with hope. not through some rifle sights. Sing a song of love, not for war. Don't say the day will come. Bring on that day, because it's not a dream. And in every city square, cheer only for peace. Poorly guarded, Rabin and his entourage walked behind City Hall following the rally toward his car, where his assassin, a nationalist Orthodox Jew named Yigal Amir, shot him. Within hours, he was dead, the blood-stained lyrics of the Song of Peace still in his pocket. At the time, Yigal Amir was a law student at the modern Orthodox Bar Ilan University. He was and remains in prison a devout believer in the complete Jewish dominion over the historical land of Israel. He was and remains completely unrepentant, citing the Din Rodef, the Jewish law that he believes made it legal for him to kill Rabin. Nevertheless, calls continue for him to be released from prison, something that has only been prevented by a law passed shortly after the assassination, requiring or allowing no parole for people who murder prime ministers. The assassination of Rabin cannot be separated from the incitement of Israel's politicians at that time, many of whom, not least of all the current prime minister, are still in power. Though Netanyahu conveniently ignores or forgets his role in inciting the violence throughout those years when so many held so much hope, the video recordings do not lie. He and his followers and fellow travelers created an atmosphere that allowed previously unthinkable acts to be discussed openly, also creating the opportunity for people to behave accordingly. And keep in mind that this was before social media. Netanyahu has become quite adept at incorporating that tool into his incitement. Remember just a few years ago during an Israeli election when he went on Facebook to admonish his voters not to skip that election, to make their way to the polls because, in his words, the Arabs are voting in droves. The convergence of this sad 25th anniversary of Rabin's murder and our own coming election should serve as a stark warning of the dangers of incitement to hate and violence. Israeli Jews, like Jews everywhere in this little family of ours, were loath to believe that such a thing could happen in the Jewish state. They made the mistake of ignoring Jewish and all of human history, thinking themselves immune to creating such a political climate. In retrospect, however, many, though not those who should have, came to realize that the incendiary language and imagery dominating the most radical opponents of the Oslo Plan had spread to the entirety of the opposition. It metastasized to salons and kitchens and synagogues, where, no longer taboo, serious discussions of assassination morphed, at least for one religious nationalist fanatic, into an actual plan. Make no mistake, when a nation's leaders abandon their responsibility to conduct discourse and debate in a civil and respectful manner, choosing instead to exploit the resentments, rage, and violent impulses of their followers, they set the stage for those prone to savagery to act. In America, amateur militiamen in their G.I. Joe costumes have been training for years to rain violence down upon Americans they don't like. The climate of seemingly never-ending incitement pouring out of our leaders helped to encourage 13 men to conspire to kidnap and execute Michigan's governor, Gretchen Whitmer, on the eve of the election. She's not a candidate, however, in order to stop, in their words, her uncontrolled power by instigating a civil war. With their trigger fingers already itching to use their Second Amendment-blessed arsenals, no one should have been surprised when the FBI uncovered such a plot. Because there seems to be no potential disagreement in our country, which some will not exploit, their anger du jour was over the governor's handling of what should otherwise have been a completely non-political approach to a public health crisis. They spoke of their anger about this, anger that has been repeatedly exploited by those who, for their own goals, made the pandemic a political issue, as if Americans needed more divisiveness, especially at a time of national anxiety about this virus. But that's the thing about incitement. It does not even matter whether the conflict, a public health crisis for goodness sake, is real. It only matters that it plays upon the hatreds of some citizens for others. Rabin's assassination and the complete collapse of the Palestinian peace process did not end the right-wing incitement. In fact, Netanyahu was quickly elected prime minister, and anger at the Israeli left continued to grow and grow under his leadership, such that today, after years of demonization, a terrorized left has faded into silence, with talk of peace a pipe dream, as the incitement continues unabated, now increasingly focused on Palestinian citizens of Israel. It does not matter that those engaging in the incitement are not in on the nefarious plans of their followers or fellow travelers. Leaders have a moral responsibility to do everything in their power to conduct reasoned and rational public debate and teach peaceful resistance to those who disagree. When they engage in incitement, they are morally, if not legally, responsible for contributing to or even worsening the environment that inspires the violence. Yigal Amir was not in the service of Netanyahu. He didn't know him, and it's doubtful he would have voted for him, preferring, as most in his camp do, an Orthodox nationalist party. Nor were the fumbling would-be Whitmer assassins specifically in the service of any party or politician. It doesn't matter. Once the atmosphere of incitement against one group and its leaders has begun, it spreads like wildfire. Tweets such as the ones we saw to liberate Michigan and other states, and the never-ending stream of derogatory language aimed squarely and by name at dissenting citizens and government officials all over our nation repeatedly contributed to creating the atmosphere. Just ask Dr. Fauci, the most trusted man in America, who now requires personal protection due to the overwhelming number of death threats he receives. Or ask Alexander Vindman, whose family has been terrorized by menacing intimidation. I could go on and on. Leaders who incite violence do not take responsibility for their actions. They take cover from moral accountability and the fact that they themselves were not the ones coming up with the plans. One Republican official, a recent Assistant Secretary for Counterterrorism and Threat Prevention at the Department of Homeland Security, recognized this and commented on what a politician who perhaps accidentally or unthinkingly incites violence on a certain occasion or another, saying this: a healthy leader, when confronted with such facts, would say, "Oh my gosh, I had no idea, and that was not my intent. Let me clear the air to make it clear that I do not support such causes. When we don't hear that, when instead we hear doubling down on the language of denials for having anything to do with creating an atmosphere that emboldens potentially violent actors to plot against leaders or threaten fellow citizens, we must be fully aware that what we are looking at is pure incitement, the exploitation of political, racial, and other resentments by leaders employing words and symbols so powerful that there remains no question that they must be aware of what they are doing. It is one of the most profound betrayals of the public trust. This week we remember its consequences on that fall night in 1995 when one man, a warrior who sought to lay down his own arms, was murdered by a violent and angry person whose bitterness and hostility were whipped into a fury by people who failed their fundamental obligation, moral responsibility as leaders. As our own election day approaches, let us be fully aware of the duties and expectations that we will bestow upon those seeking our trust. We'll continue now with Al Shlosha. A reading. We have a natural head start in being good. Considering others is fundamental to our biology, but there's always room for improvement. We can get better at being good people by thinking about what being good really means, reflecting on the needs of others and ourselves. Humanists don't believe in any supernatural source of commands or rules for being good. Instead, humanists hold that we need to think for ourselves about what sort of person we want to be, about the consequences of our actions. As humanistic Jews, we look to our own story to inspire us. In ancient times, Rabbi Hillel said, "If I am not for myself, who will be for me? And if I am only for myself, what am I? And if not now, when?" The late songwriter Debbie Friedman of blessed memory combined Rabbi Hillel's words with others from the Haggadah. In every generation, Jewish people should imagine themselves having come out of Egypt to freedom. What did she mean by appending these words? She meant, I believe, to teach us that as Jews, knowing who we are, that our mythic foundation as a tale of liberation should serve to remind us to be true to ourselves, we must be there for others in need. Continue with Im Eina Nili.
אין אני לי מי לי, וכשאני לעצמי מה אני, ואם לא עכשיו, מתי, אם אין אני לי מי לי, וכשאני לעצמי מה אני, ואם לא עכשיו, מתי. בכל דור ודור חייב אדם לראות את עצמו כאילו הוא יצא ממצרים. אם אין אני לי מי לי, ושאני לעצמי מה אני, ואם לא עכשיו, מתי.
The radical idea of humanism is that every human being should be seen as having dignity and equal worth simply by virtue of their humanity. Once we understand that we are all parts of the same species and the same long story, it is possible to feel a connection with all people, everywhere. We can imagine ourselves in their position and know that what happens to them could happen to us. All human beings should have a right to dignity and to our concern. This feeling of empathy is strengthened by officially recognizing and guaranteeing human rights. History has shown us that this is the best way to create more peaceful societies for everyone. Continue with Na'aseh Shalom. In this community where we find strength and common purpose, we turn our minds and hearts toward all those who need our love and support, those who are ill, those who suffer pain of the body or spirit, those who are lonely, those who have been wronged. Tonight, our well wishes are extended to these members of our community and to their loved ones, to Lonnie Fleischer, Cece Stone, Julia Eliason, Karen Tremper Harris, Myron Tink, Robert Liebhaber, and Rabbi Peter Schweitzer. May all who suffer know that they are not alone. May they be healed quickly. May they experience a complete recovery, a refuah shlema, the renewal of their bodies and the renewal of their spirits. Our thoughts turn to those who are no longer with us, our own loved ones, those whom our friends and neighbors have lost, the martyrs of our people whose graves are unmarked, pardon me, and those of every people and nation whose lives have been a blessing to humanity. As we remember them, we meditate on the meaning of love and loss, of life and death. We recall now our loved ones whom death has recently taken from us, those who have died at this season in years past, and those whom we have taken into our hearts with our own. Tonight, we continue to mourn the recent deaths of Elaine Gluckman, Bernice Bunny Lasker, and Stuart Rice, as we observe the art sites of Eli Weinstein, Carolyn Lederman, Nora Peisner, Faye Weiss-Rubin, Norma Geltner, Abe Rosenshine, Leonard Fox, and Isaac Kaplan. Yehi zichram livracha. May their memories be a blessing to those whom they've left behind. That's our service for tonight. Big week ahead, everybody. Looking forward to seeing you on the coming Shabbat. Shabbat Shalom will conclude now with the song, May We Know Peace.
May we know peace as we go on our way. May we be guided by love. May we be possessed of health and joy. May this be our future. Shalom. 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 May this be our future. Shalom. 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 May this be our future. Shalom. May we feel sheltered by the wings of peace. May we abide in safety and in love. May grace